cleared a bunch of stuff. Who was helping me yesterday after school yesterday? After class? Yeah, after class. And we took some messages off, so I now have used only 11 of 16 gigabytes. So, hello Angela, we're not going to cut out on you. It's good to see you. Hi Toby as well. We're going to talk about John 11. It's the story of the resurrection of Lazarus. And I'm going to kind of go through this as quickly as possible. We won't get done with it today, but we're going to do an in search on this. And there's some points in this lecture where I take issue with what they're saying, and I'll tell you that when I get there. And I just think that it sounds kind of, I don't know, snobby, but I think mine's better. So I think it's more true to the text. So that's what we'll do. We're not going to read through the whole thing right now. We're going to go through it a little bit at a time. But Jesus probably stayed in Perea for some time. We don't know how long. He was probably there when he waited 2 days to go see Lazarus. He found out Lazarus was sick. And it says because he loved Lazarus, he stayed 2 more days where he was. We're going. Does that make sense? If Mrs. Springer came in right now and said, Lane's really sick, I'd be like, peace out, I'm leaving, right? But Jesus waited because of his love for Lazarus. We'll talk about that. Jesus goes to Bethany, to the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, the same Mary and Martha we've seen before in other, we see in other stories, and Lazarus was their brother. So Bethany was not far from Jerusalem. It was called a Sabbath's day walk, so you could only walk a certain amount of distance on the Sabbath. So you could walk from Bethany to Jerusalem on the Sabbath, but you wouldn't be able to walk farther without it being work. It's just on the down slope across from Jerusalem of the Mount of Olives, so not far at all. And I have a couple pictures to show you. These are in your book, but this is a reconstruction of a first century tomb. This isn't an actual first century tomb. I think you can see in the picture in your book that there's like a speaker on there, which that wouldn't have been original to the tomb. But it's similar to the type of tomb that both Jesus and Lazarus would have been laid in. There you see that stone, and you stoop down to get into the sort of cave-like structure, and then the stone is rolled over the opening. And we'll talk more about, I think we've talked a little bit about graves in those days. We'll talk more about that. Now this is an actual house that's been excavated in Bethany that they believe is from the first century. So this would have been there when Jesus was there. Now, we don't know for sure where Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house was. Probably wasn't too dissimilar to this, though. This is pretty typical of houses. There is a house not too far from here that some people say was Mary and Martha and Lazarus' house, but I don't think we can know that for sure. There are houses like Peter's house in Bethsaida is pretty well known because of the things that have been written on the wall. It was and the coins that have been found were first century coins, and it was obviously used as a place of worship from very early on, and so they believe that to be Peter's house. I think that's a pretty good guess. But anyway, this is the oldest house to have been excavated at Bethany. So let's talk about this story. This first 6 verses. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, this village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. Now, have we read this story in John yet of Mary wiping Jesus with the ointment and wiping? No, we haven't. It's like in 13 or something like that. It's after this chronologically. However, the story was so well known that John is letting him know which Mary, right? Because there are a lot of Marys. was it Mary Magdalene? Was it Mary the mother of Jesus? Was it, so that they can know it's this Mary that he's talking about, even though chronologically that story takes place after this. So the sisters sent to him, because Lazarus was ill, the sisters sent to him saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill, Lazarus is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. So, I guess that is 6, yeah. We learn from this a number of things, but the first thing it talks about is how God operates. God's ways are not always our ways. Sometimes he does stuff that we just don't understand. Did Jesus love Lazarus? Yes, verse 5 tells us that. Did he know Lazarus would die? Yes, he did. Did he go immediately to see Lazarus? No. Did he keep Lazarus from dying? No, he didn't. Would we have done the same thing? Probably not. Probably not. If someone we love is ill, we want to go be with him. So then why did Jesus wait? Jesus knew what he was going to do, and it was for the good of the family at Bethany as well as for the faith of his disciples for this to happen this way. We don't always understand what God does. And some things we'll never understand. Some things will happen in our lives that we will never understand why. But we can know he is working everything out for his glory and for our good. Tim Keller said this is deep and it's hard to understand, and you may even go, when I tell you this, but I believe it to be true. That God always does what we would ask him to do if we knew everything he knows. God always does what we would ask him to do if we knew everything he knows, but we don't. We don't know everything he knows. God always does what is perfectly best for us and for his glory. Now, man, you had your hand up.
So what do you think Lazarus, do you think he went to heaven and came back after 2 days? Or?
I don't know really about that. What happens to the body between our death and our eventual resurrection when Christ returns or at the rapture is kind of unknown. Some people call it soul sleep, some people call it other things. All I know is that Paul writes, to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. So in some way we experience God's presence. We can't, but I just don't think we can know exactly what that looks like. Here's what Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, by the way, this is my husband's favorite Bible verse, says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Why shouldn't we lean on our own understanding?
Because God knows best.
What?
Because God knows best.
Because God knows best, and we don't. We think we do, right? But we don't. And we sometimes, we can't see everything, and we can't know everything, and we think we know what is best, but maybe we don't, right? Maybe we don't, and oftentimes we don't. So we are to trust God with all our hearts and allow him to lead us, and he will make our paths straight as we acknowledge him, as we live with boldness and confidence for him, and then leave the rest up to God. So we're going to read on. We see in this next passage the weakness of the disciples. There are places here where I think the text overreaches a little bit, so I will tell you that, and then there's places where I think it's just not talking about what's important, so I'll tell you that as well. So we're going to see, first of all, possibly a lack of courage in the disciples. Here's what it says. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again?" So they're afraid, right? They don't want to go back to Jerusalem because they wanted to kill Jesus. And if they kill Jesus, maybe they'll kill us. And I think possibly they were afraid. Possibly they did lack courage. I understand that. I understand that sort of fear of something bad happening and not wanting to go somewhere. I think I've told you that I spent, from the time I came to Christ until about 11 years ago, I spent my entire Christian life being scared to death that if I really gave myself fully to Christ, he would send me to Africa. And I didn't want to go to Africa. In fact, there was a song that was supposed to be funny by a guy named Scott Wesley Brown in the late 70s. And it was called "Please Don't Send Me to Africa." And it was tongue-in-cheek. It was this guy telling him all the things he would do for God, but he didn't want to go to Africa. I did not find it funny because I really didn't want to go to Africa. Why? I'm petrified of snakes. I am so scared of snakes. And there are snakes in Africa, and most of them are venomous. And so I was scared. And then our church began to partner with a pastor in Africa named Thomas Kaluga, and his work in planting churches in unreached territories of Zambia, and his work in helping the orphans around Serengeti. And these pictures of the orphans in Serengeti kept piercing my heart until the point that God changed me from a person who was scared to death to go to Africa to a person who was begging God for the opportunity to go. And I've been 3 times. I hope to go back. The trip that we take is always in April, and I can't really take 2 weeks off of school in April, but I hope to go back someday. God can allay our fears. He can overcome our fears. But they were fearful. So Jesus' answer to them is this: "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone works in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world." And then basically what he's saying is, well, I'm in the world. We need to do this work. This is what I came to do. Get on board. Come with me. "But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." And the disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. It's the best thing for him. Let him sleep. He'll get better. Hasn't your mother always told you that? You don't feel good? I want to go take a nap right now. Like right now, the best thing for me would be to go take a nap. I can't do that." That's what they think is happening here. We see this misunderstanding in John again. So now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, and I think he probably said it like this: "Lazarus is dead," so that they could get it. "And for your sake I am glad that he was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Now, the curriculum is going to say that this is a lack of faith on Thomas's part. We don't know how he said that. He could have said it, "Oh, great, let us go so we can die too." But he could have said, "Okay, Lord, let us go, and if we die, we die," right? We don't know how that was said, so I think that's an overreach of the text. So they were, I think, afraid of going to Jerusalem. They lacked understanding. There was misunderstanding. I would call it misunderstanding yet again, which is a common theme in John. I think I've done with this one. I might do a new one. So that's a common theme in John, so we see that. But the last one, lack of faith, I don't think we can put that on Thomas. I don't think we know for sure what his attitude was toward going to Bethany, which was near Jerusalem, not Jerusalem, but going to Bethany near Jerusalem. And then in this next part, we see the wisdom of Martha. Don't let me forget to give you your study guide for the next test. Where are we? almost done, huh? Okay.
When do we leave? 52?
What?
52?
We're period 3, right? It
Yeah.
says chapel schedule is 10:50, so I better hand these out now. We'll pick up here tomorrow.